Hey, what's going on, everybody? Today is Thursday, January 25th, 2024, and you are listening and watching the Daily AI Show live. You're here, made it. Welcome. We're happy you're here. And we today means Beth, Andy, and I'm Brian. I will see if anybody else joins in another few minutes. But today we are talking about, if you happen to see our splash screen, if not, we're talking about will AI kill human creativity, or will it, what was the word I used? Or will it like upgrade it? That's not the word I had, but I lost it.
Democratize, anyway. Like make it possible for everyone to be creative.
Yeah. And this is a perfect place to just actually kind of kick this over to you, Andy, to kind of kick us off on this. So take it away, sir.
Okay, here we go. Indulge me here. It'll take a few minutes, but you'll see where I'm going with this. Okay. So generative AI makes creation easy. But we're going to talk today about the striving of humans that births creative thought and expression in art and literature, and innovation in science and technology, not reductive or deductive or brute force thinking, but those breakthroughs of imagination and synthesis that come like sparks from a grindstone. So now I want to go way back to the early 1700s, and a fellow who I studied in college named Alexander Pope. You'll see where I'm going with this. He was deformed physically at age 12. He grew to only 4.5 feet tall as an adult, and he had a severe hunchback and persistent and kind of disgusting health problems. His family was ostracized for being Catholic in Anglican Britain, and they moved into the forests outside London to a little place there where he was self-taught, because he was prohibited from going to school or becoming a professor by the then anti-Catholic Test Acts. He is an example of a genius creative who became so despite struggles in life and society. He earned a pearl of great praise from that struggle, because today he's regarded as the dominant poetic voice of his century and a model of prosodic elegance, biting wit, and enduring satire. And prosodic here, by the way, refers to the rhythmic aspect of poetry and language, so the intonation and rhythm. And I'm going to read you a little section of his poetry that's about this subject that we're talking about, amazingly. But you know Alexander Pope a little bit through some phrases that we hear today: damning with faint praise, or to err is human, to forgive divine. Those are penned by this creative genius. Now, he developed, of course, through his ostracizing, disdain for the elite men of letters of the time and for the educational system. And he wrote this poem called the Dunciad, which is studied by English majors like me. And I'm going to read you a little section of it. He's talking here about the men who educate other men, because women didn't get to go to college back then. And he says this about the educational process: we only furnish what he cannot use, or wed him to what he must divorce, amuse. Full in the midst of Euclid dip at once, and petrify a genius to a dunce. Or set on metaphysic ground to prance, show all his paces, not a step advance. Here's the killer line: with the same cement ever sure to bind, we bring to one dead level every mind. So fast forward to today, and there's a similar man of letters. Oh, you like that, huh? Yeah, there's a similar man of letters, a guy named Nick Cave, who wrote something recently which prompted discussion about the effect of ChatGPT specifically, but in total generative AI. And I'm gonna read you excerpts from what he wrote, but just to give his qualifications, the founder and bassist of the Red Hot Chili Peppers, Flea, called him the greatest living songwriter. He was ranked within the top 20 greatest lyricists by some major critic of that. Anyway, this guy is an incredible voice. And here's what he says about ChatGPT. Quoting: ChatGPT rejects any notion of creative struggle. It rejects that striving alone against the known animates and nurtures our lives, giving them depth and meaning. ChatGPT is fast-tracking the commodification of the creative spirit by mechanizing imagination. It renders our participation in the act of creation as valueless and unnecessary. ChatGPT's intent is to eliminate the process of creation and its attendant challenges, viewing it as nothing more than a time-wasting inconvenience. ChatGPT asked, why strive? Why bother with the artistic process and its accompanying trials? Why shouldn't we make it faster and easier? Now, to kick off this discussion, I ask these rhetorical questions. What happens if creative acts become effortless, guided by a soulless creative assistant? What if our children never need to struggle to create of their own will because they have access to a creator that is beyond their ken? Discuss.
That was amazing and great. First of all, I just want to say how cool that was. And by the way, you're getting props in the comments. Jen Schwartz said, Bo and Andy has entered the chat, and I'm so excited. And also, Daniel was early on, and he said, I think AI will help the creative process as an author and artist. I think that's a great point. I'm actually glad to see that, Daniel. Thank you. I'll put Jen's up too, because she just had another one. She said, Jen also said, as an English major who is exploring the AI world kind of tentatively, I'm so here for these creative tie-ins. Ooh, this is going to be such a delicious episode. Jen, you're the best. We always appreciate you being here. And I agree. So my answer to that, Andy, but I wanted to give you props for having such a great intro to all this, is my first thought when I was listening to your quote from Nick Cave and what he was saying, I had heard that before, is how am I less creative if I'm simply using a tool? I feel that when I'm using an AI tool, that what it does is it opens up the door to places that I may not have had access to. It democratizes it. It takes down some of the walls around some of these areas. But I personally don't feel like I struggle less. I don't feel like it gives me the answers. I feel like I have a tool that helps me expand my thinking and my creativity, not limits it. That's my experience with it. But I would love to hear, Beth, you're super creative, right? With what you do with not only, you're just a creative in general, you're an artist. So what do you think in terms of like that and how you use it for Midjourney and the cool pieces that you create there with your art?
So I would say that it's a very interesting take. I come at most things improvisationally. The more frustrating moments with Midjourney and with AI is when you're trying to control everything, because that is both a creative act to try to figure out how to do that, but also just an iterative, very frustrating experience. And that's not the way that I create. I create from a much more playful place. And I think when we look at AI as a creative collaborator, it can expand our creativity. I also get from the music standpoint, right? Like I do things artistically with Midjourney and these sorts of things. I've played with Suno, whatever that is, and some stuff, but it's just not at a level for me where it can be an effective creative partner. It's too like, of course, we're just doing this chord progression, or like, let's throw in a random one. Like, like that's not how that works. You have to like telegraph some stuff and do some interesting things. So I also feel like it is it can expand my creativity. But I get it. I in the places where I don't want to be creative and I just want to create something that is fine, right? Like,
yeah,
give me a fine email response to this that says what I want, and I don't need it to be super creative. I love it, and it expands. It not only does it do that fine, but it also expands the time I have to be creative.
That's what I was going to ask. Doesn't it by giving you back the most precious thing we have, which is time, to be creative in the ways you want to? Because the reality is, like you said, Sometimes I don't want to be creative. I just need a PowerPoint that's going to get the job done. And like, I don't need the best images and stuff. And I feel that like, you know, it's a hindrance sometimes to work with people who are super creative and they're like, that's not the right photo. And I'm like, but it'll get the job done. It's 90% of the way there. And now we're fighting over the last 10% for creative differences. And that drives me nuts because I'm a very much a, it's good enough, let's move on type thing. Mm-hmm. For work, you know, like, because in places where I don't need to be super creative, but then I feel like because I didn't have to spend time there, oh, look, now I have time to go, got to point the wrong, it's always opposite, right? I have time to play that guitar back there and I have time to sit down and just noodle and just be creative. But when I'm sitting with the guitar, what am I doing? I'm pulling from all my past experiences. It's derivative. I'm pulling from, you know, playing Dave Matthews Band as a kid because he was huge back in and me and I had a buddy and we were like, oh, to be able to play like Dave Matthews, which I cannot. But that would have been our goal of ours when I was like 16. I just wanted to play guitar like Dave Matthews Band. I wanted to go up and visit my brother at UGA. And I was pretty sure if I learned how to play guitar, all the girls were going to come running around. That didn't happen either, but that's why I just that was my reasoning for like picking up the guitar at 16 and learning to play. And I'm now 45, almost to be 46 next month, and I still enjoy playing guitar and being creative in that way. I don't personally see that if I use AI to help me come up with a new idea for a song and we work together in a co-working way, that is somehow diminishing the output. I don't feel like I had to work less to get there because I don't know. Is what Nick Cave's saying, Andy or Carl? By the way, Carl's here. Is he saying that, like, Andy? I don't know. What do you think? Is he saying that the only way, like, the way to do this is you've just got to go through the suck. You've got to sit in the dark room for hours, or at the typewriter, or sitting with the guitar, or in the studio, and nothing good comes out of it. And you need that. You need that agonizing nothingness in order to get breakthroughs to creative. I certainly know people who create that way that are like, look, nothing good happens for the first 5 hours of me doing this topic or this act, but I know that I get really super creative in the 6th hour. So I'm willing to put the pain in for the first 5 because I feel that the 6th hour is where things happen. Or Saturday Night Live, you know, is famous for like writing at 3 and 4 a.m. Well, couldn't they write at 2 p.m.? Couldn't they? I mean, no. Why do they have to wait to 3 or 4? And Beth,
everything out of after midnight is just funnier.
Okay, let me answer the question that was embedded in that.
Yeah.
What do I think Nick is saying? I think Nick is saying that there is a need for, in order to achieve the highest level of creativity, there needs to be this banging your head against the wall struggle that teaches our neural network, our brain, something that, you know, it doesn't just, you know, spring into being without having to face those struggles. So think about this, comparing the neural networks that are in artificial intelligence to ours. I think his concern is that if everyone has access to this outboard system, doesn't that, over the broad population and over time, doesn't that depress the learning that's happening in humans? Because they can always turn to generate something creatively or outside the brain. And what we really need is we need to expose humans to a struggle internally in order to have them create the abilities that are creative abilities. I think that's what he's saying. That's our meaning and purpose in life, is that we have to put ourselves through that crucible of difficulty in order to become creative ourselves. And if we don't involve ourselves in that struggle, then it's going to be out there. Yes, in fact, AI will ultimately be much more creative than we are. It's capable by brute force, in effect, to create many more variations than we can generate individually.
Okay, I have 2 pushbacks to that, and I guess it's not a pushback to you, Andy, because you're saying what you think Nick is saying. But this would be my 2 pushbacks. Number 1, since the dawn of the internet, so 90s, we'll just say the 90s, are people less creative? Do we feel as a whole, as society, that we have seen less creativity in the world since the internet? My answer to that would be resounding no. I've seen some of the most beautiful, amazing, creative pieces of art in various forms post 1990. So that's my opinion on that, obviously. Number two, doesn't it always come back down to you're not voted on, you're being lifted up, upvoted, whatever you want to say it, by society, by your peers, by people who are looking at it and saying, yes, that moves me. Yes, that resonates. I'll give you a perfect example. We don't have to get on this topic, but go check out a British singer. He's more popular, I think, in Britain right now. I found him on TikTok, Ren, R-E-N. And if you want to see an amazing performance of art, go check out on YouTube. Go look up Hey Ren. It's him in a guitar, and I will tell you, it's a good, solid 9 minutes of your life to watch this. Not kid, he's like 20 something. Do this thing with the guitar. Anyway, go check that out. Ren, R-E-N. It's worth your time today to go do that and move you in terms of.
Also, slight trigger warning. If you have a thing about like ancient mental hospitals, like maybe let this one go.
Have you seen it, Beth? You know who I'm talking about?
It is an amazing performance. I agree with Ryan. I just like slight trigger warning.
So I use him as an example because like he's younger. He probably has only lived in the era of the internet. And I look at him and I go, I've never seen anything like that. That's new to me. That's like what he did, his level of creativity through his experiences. So anyway, my pushback is just simply to say, like, do we really think we've gone through these technological innovations many, many, many times? Have we seen less creative? Are we less creative today than we were in the 1700s?
Can I there was an article here that I kind of read prior as a prep. So I just want to read to you the reactions to some of the world's greatest technology. So the printing press. And then the reaction to this was met with resistance from some groups. Professional copyists who had previously enjoyed their status and prestige saw the printing press as a threat to their livelihood and feared it would put them out of work. Sounds familiar. Let's go to the telephone.
It did.
Reaction. Some critics feared that the telephone would cause a breakdown in social interaction and undermine face-to-face communications. Although I think that it was
maybe that one came true.
It was feared that if people in America got telephones, they would no longer show up to national celebrations, exhibitions, concert halls, and would retreat to their rooms and listen to the trembling telephone. And then the personal computer. When it came to the computer, there was kind of a panic that was mostly about potential mass job loss, coupled with the confusion of not being able to figure out how to make the machines work. So when you talk about creativity, every single printing press, telephone, computer, guaranteed there would be headlines, there'd be op-eds or whatever it would be, people fearing that this thing would take over something, right? Because they were used to doing copyists, the telephone, whatever it was, they're used to that. But now I think like with AI, I see it as the exact same thing. It's just progressing at a faster clip. But I really, really believe that we as humans will figure out how to be creative using these things. The creativity will be different, but you'll see the most amazing creative implements or whatever it is, whatever you're using, sound, audio, visual, image. You'll see a new type of creativity that every single generation always complains about the generation after it. Well, they're soft. They can't do that. They can't do this. Well, I think that's what's going to happen is like the next generation is going to be, has the tech to be exponentially more creative than previous generation. And then previous generation would say, well, in our days, we had this, we had social media, now you have this. So I just think it's the natural evolution of society.
Yeah, I resonate with that. I mean, just to share my personal opinion about this, I think that AI is a tool set that does, eliminate for me to a large degree the long hours and difficult trainings that would have to be pursued in order to, like, for example, create a video. Like, I've never done video editing. It would take me a long time to learn how to do that. But now I might well be able to generate a video to fulfill some imagination that I have about something that I want to present that I couldn't have done before. So it does smooth the way to, the expression that I want to deliver. So it will enable a large portion of the population that will take advantage of these tools. It will enable them to do something much more creative than they might have otherwise. But again, I go back to my concern about it is that there is a development process that I would have gone through in pursuing such a thing if I decided to take that as a specialization, that actually is developmental to me and gives me capabilities beyond just the specific skill that I learned through that struggle. That I worry that there's a large portion of the population that will just never undertake any such diligence to actually develop themselves in some way, instead relying on the technologies outside them to do that. Maybe that doesn't change the fact that there is always a small elite group of people who will be able to use their intelligence to strap together multiple outboard intelligences in order to create something that's way beyond what any one person could have done in the prior generation. That'll happen. But what happens to the mass populations when they're reliant on these external tools?
Well, so one thing I want to point to respond to that is when we talk about the creativity angle, I like to think about it as there's a lot of people, like I think Replic's goal is there's a lot of people with really good ideas on how to create something or solve a certain problem. They just don't have the skill set, or they'd have to spend hours learning Python or JavaScript, not everything else. That the democratization of that alone, being able to use natural language to create what you've been thinking in your head to solve a problem, to me, that's the creativity that now is very, very close for people to do. I think the more big problem is, how do you enable everyone in the world to have access to this, to really lift up like humanity in general?
Right.
Because right now, the only people who are going to have access to these tools are the ones who, in more developed countries. Like some people will never be able to access some of these things. And that's like an unfortunate, we're still in the cases where some people just don't have even reliable broadband or even internet. So how are they going to be benefiting from all of this too?
Well, in the terms of creativity, obviously it doesn't look, somebody will always choose in their path of their creativity to go sit on a beach at sunsets and create their masterpiece or their next album or whatever. And that won't change. AI will not rob somebody of that experience or that ability to do that. They may choose to abstain and not use any AI tools in their creative process because that's their process. But I think it being, like you say, democratizing it and getting it available to people so they do have the option to use it and they can be creative in other areas that they wouldn't have had access to. That to me is the real push here, is to make sure that more people have the opportunity to unlock. Because I think everybody is creative. What we're talking about is like AI won't make people creative. AI will unlock creativity that's already naturally within humans, and they don't have a reasonable outlet because of money, because of time, because of whatever. And I think there's AI tools that are going to take care of that. That's what I get excited about, I guess. But you're right, Carl. I mean, coming back to access and making sure that we get this in the hands of everybody, because if only the rich, only people who happen to look like me around the world, right, have access to this, or only get access to this, well, then we really will suffer, because who wants all the creativity to come out of only people who look like me? I don't, so we need to get these tools in the hands of more people, more diversity, so that we can see the full effects of what it unlocks.
Okay, so this is like an underlying thing for this conversation. I'm not trying to derail it. I just want to say that what we are not addressing is that creativity requires time, right?
I knew you were going to say
that creating something of meaning is valuable in what your current life circumstances are. And what AI potentially does is create a circumstance where a bunch of people are using a lot of time to meet their basic needs, right? And so that's, like, to Carl's point, how are we bringing broadband in, and how are we doing that to the person who's spending 18 hours a day to get water? Broadband, right. Not like, sure, like maybe a well before we do the broadband, right? Like that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And like, this is not an area I know a ton about. I'm just saying that the circumstances that that were happening when Nick Cave was putting all his like many hours in so that he sucked as a lyricist so that then he could get better at it. That is not necessarily what the new generations are being born into.
So, an excellent point. And I was thinking literally at the same time about all the obstacles to my creativity that are the routine chores and daily requirements that I have to fulfill, that don't give me the time to do the things that I know I could do if I had the time to do them. And that is a pervasive problem. And it's related to this whole question of whether AI, through its enormous productivity, will accrue to the benefit of the masses rather than just to the elite few who own the sort of the capital pinnacle of where the money is going, from this thing. Because they're going to want to have people to chop wood and carry water, not be able to be creative, just to keep them occupied. And that's not in service to the collective creativity of humanity. That's another show. But it's all related. And I think that we're at an inflection point in society here where AI has the potential to allow people to have the time to be creative and to give them tools that will make them much more facile with creative efforts. But it's also possible that this could be the collapse of a society in a way that creates masses with pitchforks who are unemployed, and people in castles who aren't really being that creative themselves. Although I have to give kudos to the people who've actually built these tools. There's some intense creativity there that's beyond my imagination.
So one thing, Andy, and Brian, when you first started talking about you need 6 hours or whatever in the dark to understand or whatever, the first thing I thought of, Aaron Rodgers, ayahuasca in the dark, just hanging out by himself, being an amazing quarterback. That's the first thing I thought of.
I'm glad you brought up ayahuasca. I don't know much about it other than like the bare minimum on it, but like, it's a good point to bring, like, everybody, you want to talk about AI and it's like, well, you need to go through the suck or whatever. And it's like, yeah, also people have been using mind altering drugs forever to be creative and unlock their creative process. And I'm not here to judge it. I'm just saying, like, maybe we could, that's a part of it. And when you talk about creativity, because it's not like we're saying, well, only me and my experiences too, because there's many, obviously, ways that people have used tools, if you will, whether it's drugs or it's other tools to aid in their creativity or unlock certain things of it. I know Will Smith, who isn't as fun to quote as he used to be after slapping Chris Rock, but Will Smith was somebody who was like, when he writes, he said, I believe it was Will Smith, I hope I'm quoting that right, where he said, I had to learn to give myself permission to suck when I start writing, because it's only through the process of writing and just writing and not staring at a blank page, but be like, well, this is probably going to suck, the first 5 pages of this, because for him, that mental gymnastics and working through that and giving himself permission to not be great is what ultimately allowed him to be great. Like, so to me, I guess I'm not as worried. I mean, I'll just say I have a 13-year-old, and I'm not worried about, will my daughter's generation, whether that's Z or whatever she's considered at 13, being less creative. As a matter of fact, I actually think we're looking at future generations being the most creative in any time in my experience, my existence. So, we're sort of out of time, so I won't do it. I won't share the screen, but like, just as an example, I threw a really easy prompt into the old AI playground, ChatGPT playground, which I haven't been into in a while, but because I can adjust the temperature in there, we haven't talked about this in a while, but you can adjust temperature. And so the playground is a great place to do that. And so I just did a really quick prompt. And I'm like, look, your goal is to be a super creative marketing agency, and, you get rewarded on creativity, blah, blah, blah. And then I was like, okay, Coca-Cola is coming out with a brand. This is my idea. And I said, not what it put in. This is my input. I said, Coca-Cola wants to sell a new flavored soda called matcha, which is flavored like matcha green tea and is slightly carbonated and has natural caffeine in it. It's to be marketed as a healthier choice to the soda industry, to Gen Z, by avoiding harmful sugars, dyes, or other ingredients. And I was like, go, right? So then it comes out with all these answers. Now, I look at that and I go, oh, that one's all right. That one's, oh, that's a good idea. I bet you if you took that now you went this way, you could have something fun. And then there was like some guerrilla marketing techniques that it brought into that were super creative, and ways that you could do it with, like, they had a great one with Venmo. And it was like, you could do this Venmo challenge. I'd never really heard that before. I was like, that's a really innovative way of doing that and sharing it. So basically in 3 seconds time, if I had worked at a marketing agency and I was like, I just need to get my brain moving, right, this is a great way for it to unlock and me go, oh, that's a path. That's a path. That's a path. But I didn't have to work so damn hard to figure out the paths. Now I can take my intelligence and run in any one of those paths. And perhaps I'll use AI more as that buddy to help me in that co-pilot through the process. So I didn't, that's what I just wanted to bring that up, because I think that's just a really easy use case of how people might be currently using AI to help their creativity. It's not to replace people, or at least for me, I don't feel like it is. It's to unlock a whole bunch of new ideas that I probably would not have come up with on my own. And now, I got this tool that can get me going. And now I can just start, being innovative and iterating on these different paths and stuff like that. So anyway,
wouldn't you think, though, now that we're gonna, really quick point, how, again, spending hours trying to think through things, wouldn't we now spend hours trying to think through how we could use AI to do X point or whatever task? Because that's what I've been now spending time with it. Yes, I can go ask a bunch, but I was like, I would sit here and I would go on walks and just have conversations with whatever GPT, and then just like, and get those ideas and bounce the ideas back and forth. But I think the thinking level gives me a lot. It isn't higher, but it just gives me a lot more perspective on things that I'm missing out. Because that's what I always ask, like, what else am I missing? What else have I not thought of? And these are the things that come through. But you still spend the hours trying to problem solve in that.
Yeah. And sometimes that's a dead end. We've all experienced that, where the idea of trying to get AI to make it faster made it slower. And you're like, well, yeah, sometimes it's a dead end. I mean, it's what you have to admit it, right? AI is not the solution to everything. And sometimes it's just it's futile, right? Sorry, Beth, go ahead.
No,
actually, you want to wrap it up to you, Beth.
Like being able to understand how AI can help you, right? Where AI is going to be good. AI can observe you. AI can recognize patterns that you're doing. Like, what if the 6 hours can be reduced to 4 because AI has noticed, hey, right? Like Brian talked about, like, he has a family member, when the knuckles start to crack, something is happening, right? That's a pattern that AI can recognize in your thought process. So now you only have to suck for 4 hours. Like, wow, you like made a 33% increase. Like, that is amazing. So Yeah, like everything, this is it can be a tool for good, or it can be a time suck, and it's kind of up to you to monitor your own experience with it. But
and I wanted to bring up Jen's last comment here just to make sure we brought it up. But Jen did say, if the first pancake is always the worst, what happens when every pancake is perfect? That's kind of the question. It removes the sense of payoff, but Andy said it more poetically than me. So thank you, Jen, for your comments. We always appreciate all our comments and people hanging out with us. Thank you, Andy, for such a great kickoff to this conversation and bringing this up as a topic. I think it's one we'll continue to come back to as always. But yeah, a lot of fun. Tomorrow, we're going to be talking about a McKinsey report that came out recently that was really, really interesting. We're just going to deep dive into it. And that'll be our conversation for tomorrow. We have a new interview that probably will be coming out tomorrow with somebody named Rebecca Love. I highly recommend you go checking her out on LinkedIn. Beth and I did an interview with her last night, and she was amazing, frankly. So I highly recommend you guys checking out that interview as soon as it goes live, and we'll let you know tomorrow if it has. That's it for today. Thanks, guys, for hanging out with us. Great conversation, and we will see you guys tomorrow.